million or thereabouts on this building, we find a catastrophic flood, first time we have heavy rain, after 150 years, the better part of this building being extant. And as a result, we have as yet an unknown cause, unknown consequences, and the electrics of this council chamber are not operating, having been incurred at high cost. Scrutiny is meant to be part of a process whereby executive member matters are taken to scrutiny and brought to council. The current process is a mess. And in terms of transparency and openness, which the leader wanted to espouse when appointed, it clearly is a dereliction of that aspiration.
Councillor Adia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Clearly the process works quite well because Councillor Walsh has managed to have a very full stay on the matter and has made a very full comment in this respect. In terms of the actual scaffolding in Albert Halls, we will provide you with a more fuller response if what you've had is not to your satisfaction. That is not an issue at all. And if in future you would prefer that came from the relevant exec member, then we'll make sure as a matter of process that will happen. That again is not a problem. So I'd be more than happy if Councillor Walsh raised this outside of this forum. I'm sure we could have resolved it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Pickup.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. At the Scrutiny Committee meeting, the issue was raised. A director gave an update at that time. We did say we'd come back with a further update in due course, and that will be provided. Thank you.
Are these agreed?
Susan House.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, point of order. I think it's likely 16. I was actually at that meeting. I attend corporate scrutiny meeting, and I'm aware of the standing orders, if you like, the constitution that we work to at corporate scrutiny meeting. And I'm sorry to have to say, because there were some very strong adjectives used by Councillor Walsh then. I remember that meeting, and there was absolutely no indication from Councillor Walsh at the meeting that he specifically wanted answers from executive members. It was not made clear whatsoever, and those are the terms of courtesy and politeness that we are required to work to at this council. Courtesy and politeness, I normally do find that Councillor Walsh does actually honour. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Are these agreed? Any abstentions? No? Right, move on.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a motion in the name of Councillor Kellett on the public health grant.
Councillor Kellett.
One, two, three. Right, there we go again. Yeah. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, with nearly a third of children aged 2 to 15 overweight and obese, the benefits for reducing obesity are clear. It will save lives and reduce inequalities. Britain has some of the worst figures in Europe for obese. And I ask members, in relation to the motion of the Standing Order number 4 public health grant, that this council commends the good work undertaken by officers and partners to tackle obesity in our schools and communities and improve the health of our young people. This council notes the severe obesity levels in primary schools and that economic and social costs will increase to sustainable levels without unreserved support from the Treasury. This council expresses its disappointment that much of the proceeds generated from the soft drinks industry levy is currently being redirected to academies to maintain of the core costs. This was not what the public was promised. Therefore, this council calls on the government to devolve a first sum of the sugar tax towards measures for early intervention services carried out by the council to tackle child obesity and support sport and school holiday clubs and activities. Further to this, the council agrees to write to the government to reverse the cuts that the council public health grant, which are restricting essential prevention and early intervention work to combat this ill health time bomb. Thank you.
Councillor Abdullah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, fellow members. Excess sugar consumption is associated with obesity and excess weight, which increases the likelihood of individuals developing a wide range of serious health problems, such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and a number of cancers. According to recent statistics, 2/3 of adult population, a third of primary school age children, a quarter of high school age children are overweight or obese. The soft drinks industry levy was a step forward in tackling the increasing rise in obesity levels in our communities by supporting sport and school holiday clubs and activities. Obesity affects communities. Severely obese people are over 3 times more likely to need social care than those who are of a healthy weight, thus putting pressure on local resources both economically and socially. To conclude, my research reading was done from government websites. The same government who originally decided to, diverted revenue from the soft drinks industry levy into core school budgets instead of redirecting towards measures to improve children's health by supporting present school holiday clubs and activities. Therefore, I formally second the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must submit, I'm not sure if this is Councillor Abdullah's first speech in Council. If it is, I'd like to congratulate her on it. If not, I apologise for missing your first one. I get very annoyed about this particular issue, Madam Mayor, because research that's been done across a whole range of activities shows it's far more cost-effective to spend our hard-earned taxes on preventative work than to leave conditions to develop and treat them at a later stage. That applies to mental health, sexual health, drug and alcohol dependency, smoking cessation, and yes, problems stemming from too high an intake of sugar. Childhood obesity is becoming a major problem, soaring up a time bomb for the future. I was delighted when the then government delegated a significant part of the NHS preventative budget to local authorities in the 2012 Health Act, partly because local authorities have always spent their money more efficiently, in my view, than central government does, and that allowed us to launch some very good preventative programmes. However, rather predictably, our grant was cut in 2015-16, and those who were here at the time remember it happened after our budget was set, which to me was absolutely disgraceful. That allowed money to be diverted to other parts of the NHS, which the government sold as being new money, which it blatantly was not. That forced us to cut a number of very worthwhile programmes. Long term, that will cost the NHS a lot more than was saved at the time. The latest move on sugar tax would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. The government is using money that should be spent on health to put a sticking plaster on their failing academies programme. The recent statement, or it was recent when this motion was first meant to be debated, means that they have to find £20 billion to fund health while pretending they are not increasing taxes. Boris says it will be a Brexit dividend. Well, it won't, because as usual, Boris is talking absolute rubbish. Our concern about the cuts to preventative health budgets would sound a little more serious
if we had not underspent our public health budget by £287,000 last year. But we have to take that in the context of the fact that because we were massively overspending on children's services, which we were forced to do, that had to be cut. It was one of the very unfortunate decisions that we have to take to cut one very worthwhile programme to fund an even more worthwhile programme. And that, I think, indicates, Madam Mayor, what a mess we're in with funding from central government. I don't agree with everything the group on that side say, but on funding, I certainly do. And I think, to be honest, a lot of my colleagues on the right do as well, secretly, even if they don't admit it. So we have very hard choices to make, and I fully support this motion.
Councillor Peel. Councillor Thomas.
Okay. So, are you okay, Councillor Peel? Can I just say, you just said that you feel that everybody actually has got an uncomfortable feeling about this. When the sugar tax was first brought out, the LGA, we lobbied like mad, cross-party, all parties, and said, by all means, give schools some of the money, but give local authorities the rest of the money, because children are not in school 365 days a year. Give us money that we can provide school activities for. And unfortunately, as ever, the government did not listen. They gave the schools a little bit extra money for sports equipment, but the bulk of the money we have had to find out through key officers in the local government department was siphoned off to the academies, and that is really what we're angry about. And I know councillors, Conservative councillors and Liberal councillors and independents that I meet in London on that committee were very, very angry about that, because we felt that was deceptive. And so a lot of the money has gone to doing basic maintenance in academies. That was not what it was intended for. And I think, you know, duping the public is not a very good idea.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. Okay. As a healthcare professional and academic, I absolutely acknowledge and agree with my peers that the UK has a national obesity crisis. To quote the King's Fund in June of this year, there are currently around a third of all children aged 2 to 15 who are overweight or obese. Of most concern is the number of those children who are becoming obese at an earlier age and who are staying obese for longer. Children from low-income households are more than twice as likely to be obese than those in higher-income households. This is therefore a salient and complex problem, and one that concerns social inequalities across populations and health. Having researched obesity very widely over the years, there is not and cannot be a single strategy to address it. Its etiology is multifactorial. Data sets are often ambiguous, as obesity is never cited on a death certificate as the prime causation of mortality, but instead it is cited as a contributory factor, along with often several others. Cardiovascular morbidity resulting from obesity is a common reason for death. We must appreciate, however, that fatness in some parts of the world can and is life-saving, but generally in our Western society it is the opposite. It is appropriate to consider the idea of councils supporting out-of-school facilities and holiday clubs, but this is absolutely a case of shutting the stable door once the horse has bolted. And our teachers who report being overworked and struggling with a raft of performance indicators cannot be seen as the panacea and guardians of public health. They can, of course, play their part as children spend a third of their time at school, but often children are starting their formal school education in an overweight state, and so the impetus for change needs to occur before school, in the home and by parents. Additionally, new government guidance is requiring teachers to assess the mental health status of children on an annual basis, and there is a direct and proven relationship between self-perception of body image in the young and mental ill health. It will be most interesting to gain an insight into the early interventions as highlighted, as professional and scientific narrative and evidence has highlighted time and time again that there needs to be a massive shift in all aspects of social life, including better preconception facilities and parent education during the pregnancy episode. Evidence concurs that obese parents are more likely to have obese children, and so public health initiatives and funding need to be focused on very early intervention work. It is the parents who purchase the food, not the young children. Interestingly, there is very little provision across this borough of dedicated preconception services. Children's centres and GPs cannot offer the full range of services required. Additionally, as breastfeeding has been newly termed normal in recent months by UNICEF, more emphasis needs to be directed to promoting this message and to supporting mothers. Currently, postpartum midwifery care is a Cinderella service, and with only around 46% of new mothers feeding their babies at 6 weeks, global targets and national targets are being missed. There is much scientific evidence to support breastfeeding being a factor in reducing the risk of obesity in children and in adult life. The soft drinks industry levy of April 16 did not generate the expected return for high threshold sugary drinks, which was estimated to be 500 million per annum, as the November 2000 figures show that only 2.75 million has been generated. However, it has been perceived by experts as a starting point of success due to the drinks industry's response in lowering their total sugar thresholds. The government's obesity plan, Chapter 2, aims to build upon this success to halve the rates of childhood obesity by 2030 by not utilising monies from the sugar tax, but by requiring councils to appropriate the council's public health grant wisely. We know this has been reduced from £78 per person to £75 per head of population for Bolton in 2018-19. It is anticipated that the Greater Manchester Reconfiguration of Maternity Services Committee, driven by the Better Births Report of 16, will lead to more support for parents in how to manage their own weight so they can manage their children's before they actually arrive at schools. Thank you.
Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When the sugar tax was announced, it was expected to generate 500 million. However, prior to implementation in April, as many as 50% of drinks manufacturers reduced the sugar content, reducing Treasury forecasts to 240 million. With the levy, the government have doubled PE and sports premium from 160 million to 320 million. This is devolved to use for school sports, breakfast clubs and after-school clubs. And they also introduced the Healthy Pupils Capital Fund of 100 million. This is for capital investment for facilities for physical education and activity, healthy eating, mental health and well-being and medical conditions. This is not for core costs. These measures have only recently been introduced along with a primary school mile and will take time to gather data for effectiveness. But to put it quite simply, there's no money left from the levy. Thank you.
Councillor Newall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not a specialist, nor am I an academic. But I do know if you take money out of a preventative budget, that it causes problems later on. And that is exactly what's happened. The public health budget has migrated to us now. It's our responsibility. And that budget is cut year on year. And we've had to find an extra, just under 600,000 this year, budget cuts to public health. Just imagine that. Just imagine what we could do with the health of our citizens with that money. A lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, but I'd just like to raise a few points regarding the soft drink industry levy. Firstly, no consultation with localities as how best to spend the money was made by the government. Mechanisms employed put the bulk of the additional resources to schools with limited abilities to shape its use. With school budgets so pressured, the risk is that this backfills existing commitments, and that's exactly what it's done. It's being used to in core facilities. The money actually precludes the use of the resource outside the school setting, i.e. leisure provision, free swimming, access to facilities. It's quite restricted in how it can be used. Sugar tax is only available for 3 programmes: doubling the PE and sport programme, breakfast clubs and Healthy Pupil Capital Fund. That's the only 3 ways it can be used. The fund is intended to improve people's lives and mental and physical well-being, but it is for things like kitchens, dining facilities and changing rooms. And the fund is for 1 year only, for 2018-19. And it really doesn't help, you know, when we have opposition spokespeople, and I don't really want to say this because he's not here tonight, but when we have opposition spokespeople referring to feeding children in breakfast clubs as Labour's pet project or frilly add-ons, it's shameful. Local authorities with large multi-academy trusts receive a direct allocation. And the PE and school premium, the schools must use the funds to make additional and sustainable funding to the quality of sports they offer already. It's not for new facilities, it's to improve facilities that they have already. And the funding for 2020-21 is going to be considered at the next spending review. Breakfast clubs. The money is used to kickstart or improve clubs in over 1,770 schools. It's hardly a pet project. It's targeted at the most disadvantaged areas of the country. And included are the Department for Education's own opportunity areas. And the idea, it helps make sure that every child gets the best start in life. I have children in my ward who go to school hungry. 21st century Britain. We have now taken an option with the Breakfast Club in Bolton that we hope will maintain this facility, which is much needed for our children. But it's not a political football, it's our children we're talking about. And to have cuts in public health budgets in this day and age is nothing short of shameful. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're talking about obesity, so I'm not sure if I should declare an interest. However, no, this is a very serious subject, and the obesity crisis in this country shouldn't be taken lightly. The UK is one of the highest obesity rates among developed countries and is getting worse. By 2050, over 35% of boys and 20% of girls between 6 and 10 are expected to be obese. The estimate on obesity-related costs to the NHS is 6 billion. So it is a very difficult subject, but I believe that it's not just about throwing money at this. I think it's about changing people's attitudes. I think it's about changing people's lifestyles. I think it's about communicating better with parents, with teachers, with other partners. I think changes are needed in tweaking school curriculums to include more sports and physical activity, maybe introduce other things like meditation. I think we certainly need to review our breakfast clubs. We did ask the Cabinet member at a recent scrutiny meeting when we discussed childhood obesity about the types of breakfasts that were being served. The Cabinet member couldn't give us a sure answer, but she said she will visit that and get back to us. So things like wholemeal bread rather than white bread, things like no crumpets on menus. So we need to change attitudes and increase working on partnerships. One of the industries, obviously, that we need to work with is the food industry. I think I commend Tesco, and we don't always usually do that, but the policy that they've introduced of giving children free fruit whilst they're shopping with their parents, I think is an excellent idea. So it's these type of strategies I think that we need to work on. And just to finish off, I would like to welcome the significant statement made by the government today on introducing looking at mental health issues within schools, because I think maybe sometimes obesity and mental health issues go together. So I welcome the significant contribution that's being made on that today, on Mental Health Day today. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Kirk Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't expecting to speak on this, so I will be brief. There's just a couple of comments I wanted to make based on the debate we've had. The idea of the motion is to combat this ill health time bomb. Well, unfortunately, the sugar tax as it stands will not combat the ill health time bomb because sugar is in pretty much everything that we have these days. You buy food in the shops today, it tastes different to what it did when I was a kid and when most people in this room were a kid. Bread, for example. Bread tastes more like cake than bread these days, especially the very cheap bread, the type of bread that a person on a restricted income will be buying because it's full of sugar. It's full of sugar to combat the taste of over-processed flour. You go into the shops and you look at ready meals, the kind of meals that a person on a restricted income is going to be buying because food has become very expensive. And there are various reasons why it's become expensive, but the food that you buy, the ready meals, they're full of sugar. If you look at the ingredients, you will be shocked how much sugar is in just about everything. So if we want to actually deal with this time bomb of ill health, we need to cut sugar from more than just soft drinks. So I think the current sugar tax isn't going quite far enough. And then my only other thing I want to say is Councillor Hayes talked about the government's Failing Academies programme, but I'd like to remind Councillor Hayes that it's the Labour government that brought in the academies, not the current one.
Councillor Kellett, would you like to have the right of reply?
Thing is with this, there's several things been mentioned here, but what no one mentioned, it's the poorer families who suffer here. The children, the burden is falling hardest on children from low income and income backgrounds. Obesity rates are the highest for children from the most derived areas. It's been mentioned cheap food. Some of these families, that's how they live. That's all they can afford because they've nothing else. This is the, well, this is it, So, and the thing is, to increase that, the children, and I find that the burden with the National Health also yearly is astronomical, and it isn't going to go down. So I urge members that we ask the government that this soft drink levy must be redirected to tackle this obesity, because it's not going to go away. It's here. And unfortunately, it's not going to go any better. So we ask you, please urge you to look at this motion and support the motion. And actually, the industry as well needs answering to this, because there's no. If the labels were on there, this contains half sugar in this tin of whatever, I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't buy it. It doesn't do it. So I ask that this motion is supported.
The Chief Executive will now proceed with the name vote. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Abdullah. Councillor Adia. Councillor Ayub. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Donaghy. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gillis. Councillor Harkin. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Iqbal, Councillor Ismail, Councillor Kellett, Councillor Karam, Councillor McEwen, Councillor Mistry, Councillor Morris, Councillor Murray, Councillor Newell, Councillor Peel, Councillor Pickup, Councillor Sylvester, Councillor Sheikh, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Waters, Councillor Zaman. Councillor Allen, Councillor Baines, Councillor Cox, Councillor Critchley, Councillor Dean, Councillor Fairclough, Councillor Galloway, Councillor Greenhouse, Councillor Haslam, Councillor Hewitt, Councillor Kirk Robinson, Councillor Muslim, Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Radcliffe, Councillor Walsh, Councillor Warren, Councillor C. Wild, Councillor P. Wild, Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Hornby, Councillor Bagnall, Councillor Hayes, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Flitcroft, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Sanders.
Carried.
The motion is carried. Let me just take... That's it. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a motion in the name of Councillor Chadwick relating to funding for highways maintenance.
Councillor Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, I rise to move this motion. Individuals have made comments to me like it's not rocket science. If it's a pothole, it should be filled. Monies for these repairs have diminished year on year, and we must manage these finances very, very carefully indeed. It is perhaps opportune to remind everybody of the criteria for repairing potholes. All local authorities have adopted the following standards from national guidelines. Footways. Town centre footways, defects of 20 millimetres or greater with 40 millimetres or more width, whilst other footways outside town centres are 25 millimetres or greater with 40 millimetres width will be approved for repair. Carriageways. Carriageways defects of 40 millimetres greater by at least 300 millimetres in any one direction are also approved for repair. Should the pothole not meet these criteria, it will not be repaired until such time as it meets those standards. Our inspection teams thoroughly review all potholes and make judgments on the urgency of repairs, always erring on the side of safety. To illustrate our problems with highways fund, it is worth reminding Council that maintenance allocation has decreased from 4.2 million in 2010-11 to 3.4 in 18-19. Additional DFT funding has declined from 1 million in the same period to nil. Bridge repairs has declined from 800,000 to 430,000. Totals for 2011 were 5 million, whilst these have fallen to 3.7 million in 17-18. However, this council has provided 11 million to cushion the impact of austerity cuts since 2010-11. Imagine what condition our roads would be in without this extra top-up. These additional funds should have come from central government, but of course, this being a Northern Labour council, we're not eligible for negative RSG funding, while like those Tory Shire councils. Labour-run metropolitan councils get none of the money to supplement road repairs. Our roads are crumbling, and this Tory government doesn't care and are turning a blind eye to this predicament. The only interaction from the party opposite was from Chris Green MP, who accused our staff of not repairing potholes properly in Bolton West. This was two ridiculous words instead of interceding on our behalf with the Secretary of State for Transport for additional funding. This problem is not unique to Bolton Council. It is a national fiasco. I repeat, a national fiasco. The Local Government Association, which represents 370 councils in England and Wales, has warned that it would now cost £12 billion to complete the much-needed repairs on British roads, and that it may take up to 2030 to complete those repairs. When benchmarking roads in Greater Manchester, our roads are some of the better roads in the 10 GM local authorities. I'm not being the slightest bit complacent. They are not of a standard which any of us can be happy with. Members opposite have the audacity to moan about the state of our roads, blaming this Labour Council whilst continuing to back the government's austerity programme. This is nothing new, I know, but you do have to abide their barefaced cheek to try to pass the failings of your government onto this council. Last winter, our gritting teams were out regularly treating roads 2 and often 3 times each evening. These freezing temperatures have seen an unprecedented rise in the number of potholes reported. Road maintenance in England and Wales is estimated to be underfunded by around 55% or £1 billion every year. The Tory pothole crisis has created huge costs and safety risks for drivers, cyclists and pedestrians. I am not happy with the situation and will not tolerate opposition councillors and Chris Green blaming Bolton's Labour Council or our highway staff for their own Tory government's short-sighted policies. I move the motion on the order powder. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Hornby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. We on this side will be supporting this motion tonight. Our roads and our footpaths are the worst they have been for many years, and I would like to start off by saying thank you to John Kelly and his team for doing an excellent job juggling the figures about and trying to keep our roads to the best that they can. As Councillor Chadwick says in his motion, a lot of what has been done has only been possible due to the funds being redirected from other areas within this council. We have huge challenges. We are expected to deliver thousands of homes across Bolton, some in areas where the link roads will be needed. We already have developers which challenge our Section 106 agreements, some of which the money goes into highways. If this government is genuine about wanting to build more homes in this borough, especially desperately needed social housing, then it better get the Chancellor of the Exchequer to write us a cheque in order that we can provide the money we need, not just to provide new infrastructures, but to provide us with desperately needed funds to maintain what we have and prevent our roads and footpaths becoming something which in some areas, in time to come, will resemble a third world country. Madam Mayor, we support this motion.
Councillor Haslam.
Madam Mayor, this really is one of those political motions where this Labour Council wish to pass the blame for their own inadequacies, in this case for their failure as the Highways Authority in providing sufficient resources to keep the roads and pavements in a satisfactory condition. It is cynically ingenuous. But the roads... disingenuous, yes, sorry. But the roads and pavements are critically important. It has been revealed that Bolton Council has the second highest compensation bill in Greater Manchester, with complaints rising by 5,000 in the last year. Conservatives fully recognise the importance of our highway network. It's necessary to maintain the asset value, vital for the safe movement along our roads, for the economy of our town, to avoid damage to our cars, and above all for the road safety of drivers, passengers, and especially all pedestrians. And politicians need to appreciate the implications for health and life itself if the network is not properly maintained. The state of our roads and pavements should be an absolute priority for this council. It is for this reason that we have launched our campaign to spend an additional £10 million to be spread equally across all 20 wards. This is a fully costed proposal which will not impact on any other budget nor on the council tax levy. Bolton Council is the Highways Authority and as such is responsible for the upkeep and maintenance and safety. The government assists with the payment of a capital grant. The DFT capital funding for Bolton's roads, excluding the special allowance for St Peter's Way, amounted to £2.97 million in 2017-18. The government also provided an additional sum of £319,000 as part of the Special Pothole Action Fund. The base government support for Bolton for 2018-19, excluding the special allowance for St Peter's Way, according to this council's own figures, is an increase of over 8% over 2017-18, whereas Bolton's council support for its own highways has fallen from £2.72 million to £1.57 million, a decline of 57%. One of the real problems for the Bolton's Highway Department is the way the council allocates funds to the capital budget in random amounts and differing costs, varying from £300,000 to £4.5 million in recent years, making a credible planning of a cohesive and credible highway renewal strategy very difficult. The DFT allocation based on three elements: needs, incentive based on quality and efficiency, and a challenge fund for major maintenance schemes. Overall, in 2017-2018, as announced in January last year, there was an extra £185 million of new money to support highways outside London. So long as this council maintains its Band 3 status, in the incentive fund, the total support from government will not be changed. And I'm sure the road users of Bolton demand the highest standards of their highway improvement. There has been no specific withdrawal of funds to Bolton. Bolton has not been singled out, and I regret what I'm unable to understand what Councillor Chadwick is referring to as deliberate withdrawal of funds. Indeed, Bolton has benefited more than many, and they were awarded the sum of £5.8 million from the Challenge Fund to help fund the highway and slip road repair improvements on St Peter's Way. Ever since I've been elected to this council in 2012, at the budget meeting we've presented an alternative. This has always been checked by the finance officers for its robustness, its legality and its viability. It has always passed those tests. And every year we have proposed extra money for the highways. And what is significant is every year the whole of the Labour Party on named votes have voted against the allocating of this extra money. The difference in approach is that we identify the highways improvements as a priority, whereas Labour do not, as is evidenced by their reluctance to put the necessary funds into their budget. It is not a question of the Council diverting funds from other areas of responsibility. It is what the Council should be doing. It is the Labour Party who dictate the priorities of this Council. It is they who have designated the Highways programme, and it is they who have demonstrably neglected the roads and pavements.
Councillor Hassan, can you sum up, please?
However, I will be supporting this because I will support any endeavour to attract any additional resources to Bolton for worthwhile reasons, and for this reason only, I shall be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Kurt Robinson. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I find myself at a loss with this motion. On the one hand, it's claiming that the government has deliberately withheld funds from Bolton Council. And then, on the other hand, it's asking the government to make new cash available to local authorities. One of these statements can't be true because they contradict one another. So my first question to Councillor Chadwick is this. Are you telling us that the government has kept money from Bolton Council, or are you asking the government for more money on top of the money that they have already given to Bolton Council? So if Councillor Chadwick is going to stick with the statement that the government has withheld funds, this is not the place to be bringing it up. It takes time to bring a motion to Council. I recall this motion, for example, being on the agenda last time we had a meeting and then we didn't get to it. So when vital services need money that hasn't arrived, time is of the essence. He should be bringing that up with the government by phone, by email, even by letter. It would still be quicker than coming to a meeting. He shouldn't be drafting a motion and then waiting months for us to discuss it. So I must conclude that this motion is asking for extra funds to cover more road repairs. Well, that's fine by me. The Conservatives have long been calling for increased road repairs in our borough. So if we can get more funds to repair more roads, let's do it. But let's go further. Let's take this opportunity, as the Conservatives have already called for, to use some of this council's vast reserves of unallocated funds, and let's get more roads repaired.
370 million.
The hard-working people of Bolton, of West Horton, of Farnworth, of Bradshaw, of every other part of our borough deserve to see the tax they're paying being spent on roads, on footpaths and on public services. It shouldn't just sit in a bank account doing nothing. So in conclusion, Madam Mayor, I will support this motion. I will support the spirit of this motion, but not the wording. I will therefore vote in favour.
Councillor Walsh.
Your Worship, the interesting thing about these council meetings is that increasingly we see motions from the Labour Party calling for more government resources. I wonder just which government funds they see being cut in order to meet some of their aspirations. Yeah. Because it is very clear. I'm not going to seek to unravel 500 years of HM Treasury workings, but clearly hypothecation is not a taxation strategy in this country. We have a general taxation pot, and there is a limit to that pot. unless, of course, members opposite are seeking to return to the heady days of Labour and inflationary borrowings, inflation rates rising, and unless they deny it, then we assume that is to be the case. But if we look, well, we know where borrowing got us previously, so let's not hide it. But you see, tonight we've had a huge contradiction in this motion. Councillor Chadwick, on the one hand, is calling for additional resources for highway funding. Yet Councillor Peel, in an answer to an earlier question, admitted that the Area Forum allocations for highways hasn't yet been determined. In other words, we'll be trying to do pothole repairs in wards through Area Forums at the worst time of the year for doing those repairs, when those repairs could have been picked up in the early part of the year had Area Forum members known what their allocations were. In terms of the issues about the state of our roads generally, there are countless people who raise with, I'm sure not just me, but colleagues and many others, why it is that in certain parts of this town we see back streets which have been freshly surfaced when front streets, potholes, main roads are full of potholes. And there are serious questions that some people might want to ask themselves about priorities within this council. And finally, without repeating what others have said in greater detail, there is an opportunity, we have said it in budget after budget after budget, that there are capital reserves that could be used, that you could capitalise highway repairs and thus bring more into the revenue pot, and still not affect the level of services for other services provided through revenue streams of this council. And in order to give the opportunity, this group launched the report and the proposal a few weeks ago to transfer from windfall sales of property and other sources £10 million into a highway improvement and maintenance programme that could be delivered with not a penny impact on council tax and yet a vast improvement on the road network in this borough.
Can I just say, I am not your worshipful person. I am Madam Mayor. 27B, okay? Thank you.
My apologies, but Local Government Act 1832, as amended.
Bolton's Constitution, just have a look at it, thank you. I will be bringing forth 27B. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. I just want to highlight something to the opposition over there, and I'm sure that my ward councillors in Farnworth will understand we have a major problem, especially around elderly places. And in June 2017, I took that issue to our Labour MP, Yasmin Qureshi. It took until May of 2018 to get that into a debate over roads and highways. Now, she did that. I watched the live debate with the Minister of Highways, who promised on a TV all in front of everybody that he would refund and start putting some money back into local authorities. We are now in, and that was in May of this year, we are now in November, no sign of it, and he made that live.
Councillor Greenhalgh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me be very clear. We've had some of the party opposite say where we would get this money from. And when we've said unallocated reserves, there's been jeering from the party opposite. Let us be very clear. And before you jeer again when I tell you this, let me say this has been fully approved by finance officers and fully costed and accepted. We would take it from the £4 million that was previously allocated to the Octagon, which was not used and which was then allocated as the loan, the £100 million taken out of there for the town centre master plan. And we would take a portion of the £9 million that is currently sat in the PSP account waiting to be drawn down to this council. It's not rocket science. There's £13 million there unallocated in this council's budget. Unallocated funds which could at any time, mid-term, not waiting for a budget, any time, if it was your priority to be spent on roads and pavements in this town. It is not allocated, Councillor McKinn. You asked the question where. That is where. 10 million of that 13 million we would spend as a matter of urgency on this town's roads and pavements. And why? Because it is one of those expectations that the residents of this town have in return for the council tax they pay. And at the moment, we've all said it, Councillor Gillis has said it, we've all said it, we'd all agree, they are in a state of complete and utter disrepair, particularly in our residential estates. And something has to be addressed, and we see this as a priority. Should more money be made available from government? Yes, it should. There should be that as well. But we have money that we could allocate now. And you're not doing it. And we would.
Councillor Salmon.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, our highways are not in a good condition because of lack of funding, and we all know that. Now, early this year, Bolton West Member of Parliament Chris Green implied in Bolton News that there was some sort of conspiracy going on, which meant that roads in his constituency were not being repaired. Everyone in this chamber knows that this was completely incorrect, and he was not doing any service to his constituency by raising these issues in such manner. If he really wants to help the people in his constituency and in Bolton, I think he should lobby the government for much needed resources for our highways. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Keep modern. Yeah, I know. I'm going to use it, don't worry. We will be supporting the motion because it's a simple request for an urgent need. That urgent need is the fact that our roads and footpaths are in not a bad condition, they are knackered. End of. Let's be quite blunt about it. They are in appalling state of repair. We all have a section of road or footpath which is not just poor, in many cases, they are dangerous. I know there are rules about what's in them, but to members of the public, when you have a footpath which is unsafe as far as they're concerned, it is dangerous. I know we have to work to the standards, and I will add my support to the officers of the Highway Department. They have an increasing job, the work has gone up, and the numbers of them have gone down. And the money and resources which they have had to do those jobs have gone down over the years. There is this argument about whether the £10 million can be found. I've not been around for a few years, but I do recall over in the years gone past, we have put items forward in the budget for increased expenditure on roads. Not always supported, but never mind. The fact is, the government is the main source of money for our roads and highways. It's an inescapable fact. Yes, we can play around the edges. It can be X million, few million, whatever. The amount of money which has been suggested by the Conservative group is a one-off. The fact is we have a demand of, last time I remember, of around 80 million plus on the backlog alone. So yes, we can spend 10, 11 million pounds. I'm not going to complain about it. It would be nice. But we've still got a backlog of 70 to 80 million pounds, and it's going worse. It's not going better, it's going worse because you can't keep pace with the level of work that is required to do the things which are needed. It is impossible. You're cycling backwards all the time. I don't think, unless we get that respect and response from government, we are going to make any real progress in this issue. So it's good to quote figures and stats and pretend your government's not done the bad things. It has. It seems to be a recurring theme tonight and at meetings which I've attended since I've come back here, that everything's okie-dory and you can produce a bunch of statistics to prove it's okie-dory. I'm tempted to... No, I won't. There are things which you can do with statistics. No, I'm behaving myself. No. There are things which cannot be done with small amounts of money. We need government resource. The things about driving and to and from work for HGVs, for schools and buses, will look at the issues which affect transport needs and the delays which come from poor conditions of roads. If you're trying to weave around a road or you're trying to drive slow to avoid potholes, etc., or poor conditions of roads, it has an impact on the economy as a whole. And that is something which needs to be taken into account. And unless government realises those issues, and which are put forward by business, the business sector as well, about delays and poor state of roads, not just minor roads, but estate roads, major roads and motorways, we are also having an impact on the economy of the country, of our own borough, and also of jobs. So the sooner the government realises that, the better. But we will support the motion.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, deplores, condemns, deliberates. Oh, good language for the barricades, comrades, isn't it really? It's not so sensible for long-term planning and creating a strategy for delivering well-maintained roads and footways the town needs. Cash is constantly available. It's up to councils themselves to claim it. As with most things in life, you get out what you put in. It's easy to ask for more, but yet deliver the same. Local authority networks are funded to maintain their local road networks via grants and other incentive-driven competitive schemes via business cases. These business cases for Highways Maintenance Fund, the Pothole Action Fund, plus additional funding streams created by central government to assist local authorities solve local problems based on local knowledge, based on assessment of local needs. Due to the many and varied tiers and levels of local and regional government and partnerships, agree with that or not, your mileage may vary, these strata of bureaucracy with their different aims, objectives and goals seem to, at present, necessitate why we have so many and various different streams. But navigate these funding streams, local authorities must, or else miss out on a cut of the pie. Last year, the Department of Transport provided approximately £240 million from general taxation for the National Productivity Investment Fund, delivered via local authorities, the funding from which included, and Councillor Chadwick, you mentioned before, northern boroughs seeming to be left out of the slice. Warrington Borough Council, £4 million for maintenance works and traffic signals. Manchester City Council, £5 million for junction improvements for pedestrians and cyclists. Blackburn and Darwin, £2 million for public access routes into the town centres. Liverpool City, how can we forget Liverpool? Liverpool City Council, £3.5 million for crossing point renewals and road surfacing. Where's our cut? The last scheme won by Bolton seems to have been tranche 1 of the Highways Maintenance Fund. Where does this leave this motion, Madam Mayor? The strategic road network, that's motorways and trunk roads, carries a third of all traffic. But coverage of the strategic road network varies across the country. This has been recognised in a report by the Rhys Jeffreys Road Fund that says a legacy of when 30% of the total of the SRN was detrunked after 1998. Between 2001 and 2009, government decisions to detrunk roads from the SRN put responsibility for these roads onto local authorities at the expense of their resources which all local authorities must share. This legacy has left an uneven road capacity coverage region by region. In the south of Lancashire, for example, there's a dense network. It's much thinner up in the north of Lancashire. In response to this, local authorities have been asked to respond to DFT around the principle of a centrally funded major road network, taking back into central funding major roads to support economic growth. This might include a few major roads in and around Bolton. There's a consultation out that's been responded to. Proposal asks for local authorities to work in partnership with each other regionally and DFT to highlight areas for spending schemes, including packages of improvements, which should be aligned to local objectives. Big schemes, if pitched right, which would provide the town with great benefits in improving local roads, including spending or saving on maintenance projects, rebalancing between national and local roads. There's a great demand on public expenditure from all sectors of the state. It's right to prioritise resources to promote growth. It means a larger pie down the road to share out. I'd like to add my thanks, that's been mentioned before, to the works that the Highways team do on the ground, particularly during winter. So while I might deplore and condemn a deliberate use of provocative language in this motion, I can support the spirit of the direction of travel because of the motion, because of asking the Exchequer for more money, of which road users of all types, more than generating duty, that which we spend on routes, the surplus being dispersed into other state-sponsored projects across all sectors, asking the Exchequer for more money to enable an increase in economic activity through infrastructure spend to connect more people to more jobs across our town and across the region, if achieved, can be a good thing if value is added by local authorities which choose to employ their local knowledge.
Councillor Morris.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I've listened with interest in this debate. Now I know the Tories' priority is roads. Our priority is adults and children's services, which this government has cut. You can't go on your feet and say they haven't, because they have. And the money you're talking about, if we had it over, we would be spending it on them. We know we're overspent on children's services, and we know we're overspent on adult services at the moment. So let's get our priorities right. We've always said on this side, that is our priority, not roads. Yours is roads. We all know that the government cut out back streets altogether 10 years ago. There's no budget for back streets. The government came down and said there's no budget at all. So let's not kid ourselves. And this 10 million you're going to magic out of reserves. What about when the school wants repairing? What about when adult services and children's services overspend? We'll magic it from somewhere else. Let's not be ridiculous. Our priorities are adults and children's. If yours is highways, good. But the government need to give us some more funding so we can get our highways right. And as Councillor Wilkinson said, 10 million to drop in the ocean. 60 to 70 million we need, not 10 million. Go back and tell your government, can we have that please? Not 10 million, 70 million. And that's what we're asking this government, to fund it correctly. But our priority on this side will always be adult social care and children's social care.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. Councillor Morris seems a bit confused, which is unusual for him because he's normally quite level-headed. The repair of roads on the scale that we're talking about is, of course, capital expenditure, not revenue. And I'm sure you know that. And the money that we are suggesting is spent on roads is not from reserves. It's from, as my colleague Councillor Greenhouse explained, it's from the bank balance of PSP, which is more than they need, it's excessive, and it's from the money that was earmarked for the Octagon that you've now taken from elsewhere. So it isn't from reserves. I'm going to support this motion because despite the phrase of deliberately withholding funds, which I totally disagree with, I do support the spirit of it, and I support Councillor Chadwick's motion on that. But I'm glad Councillor Chadwick explained in his presentation what a pothole is and what a defective pavement is, because I think we are guilty in this chamber of not managing expectations. I would like to put a good word in for highways, because when I report a genuine pothole, one that is 40 millimetres or more, or a genuine pavement defect of 25 millimetres or more, I get them repaired. Pretty well get them repaired every time. So it's a credit to our highways department that they do respond, and they respond to these particular criteria. What we perhaps expect too often, and certainly what the public expect, is that minor defects in roads are repaired. And that's what we'd all like to do, but let's just be clear that that isn't our mandatory responsibility. Our responsibility is genuine potholes. But I'll be supporting the motion, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Fairclough.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council,
And I wasn't intending to speak, so I will hopefully be brief. But I did want to respond to Councillor Morris there. Yes, our priority is roads. It's not the only priority, but it certainly is one of our priorities and always has been. It's certainly not new to anybody in this room that we are very, very keen that the roads and pavements that are used by everybody in our town should be of a standard far higher than they are at the moment. And we appreciate times are tough, but when the tough, when the tough gets going, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, yeah, something like that. Right, in the end, we've looked at it and we've taken money, or allocated money, that isn't going to be used for adult services or children's services, because that is, sorry? And can't be. Just a minute, I have a small flap at the back where he's just pulling the string. No. We have identified this money, £10 million. We have also said we would like it to be done at £500,000 per ward. So each ward would be able to look at their own potholes. Well, that's up to them. But they would get their £500,000 and they would be able to use it. And I think that that would get a lot of support. But I don't really see why it has to be one or the other. Why can't it be both? Why can't we ask the government quite rightly for extra funding? And that's why we are prepared to support this motion. But what's wrong with also looking closer to home? You can't just sit there all the time saying, it's the government's fault, so therefore we're going to sit here with these crumbling roads and we're just, and it's a bit like I'm going to scream and scream and scream until I'm sick. And they're not going to give you that much more money. So in the end, why can't we do both? We've identified the 10 million. It's there, it's there, it's not being used for anything else. It's been identified, it's been costed. Why can't we do that and ask the government for money as well? Too easy? Thank you.
Councillor Adia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. I do think there's been some misunderstanding about this pot of money that you're referring to from PSP. So just to make sure I was listening correctly, you're suggesting that we should spend 10 million on roads, 4 million from Octagon and 6 million from PSP. There is a profit in the PSP account, but it's a profit share account. Okay, so, and therefore there is an amount that's left over. We need to work out whether it is 6 million or not, because there are still some issues to work through. I think we can talk about this after, based on some legal advice that I've just had. But let me come to the main point, and that is you're talking about this money as if it's not there for a particular reason. The reason we have money in the PSP account is because it supports our developmental projects in the town centre. That money's just not there for the sake. It is our decision. So what
I'm sorry, but can you just let him speak? Yeah. Thank you, and then we can move on to some other motion.
So let's be really clear. You come to this chamber many occasions complaining about the town centre, complaining that you want more development, complaining you want the council to be enterprising, and then when we do that and we have a wonderful partnership with PSP and we have some money in there that will support future projects, you want to raid it. You want to leave nothing in there for us to do developmental work. What's going to be left there? So what you're saying is it's roads over town centre development. It's roads over absolutely everything else. I really think you need to go back and really think very carefully about what you're asking here, because there is a very significant opportunity cost to this council, and I would ask you to review your thinking around this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How odd. Just watching Conservative Council after Conservative Councillor get up, rip into the motion, and then conclude by saying, but we'll support it. What an odd situation. What an odd situation. I don't know whether the whip's on or not, or we're going to see perhaps individual members going individual ways, Councillor Walsh. Not sure. We'll wait and see for that. But let's start off with a bit of good news, because you lot should all be grinning, shouldn't you? Because austerity's over. It's finished, hasn't it? We heard it at the Tory conference. Austerity is over. Well, I'd like one of you people opposite to tell me how the Prime Minister can make such an unbelievable claim that austerity is over. And worse, can anyone tell me how the Tory Treasury Secretary, Liz Truss, and I don't use this word often, but I'm going to use it today, can outrageously lie to the country and state, and I quote, "We are not making any cuts to local authorities." We're not making any cuts to local authorities. I'm sure our Borough Treasurer is going to be whoop-a-hoop on this. Can any of these opposite tell me how these statements are not lies when the government's already lined up a further 1.3 billion to local government next year? 1.3 billion, and that includes highways. So let's call them out for what they are. They're liars, and they're outrageous liars. Let's just get that straight, first of all. Now, Councillor Chadwick gave us some figures that showed that highways have been repeatedly hacked since 2010. When Councillor Haslam floated some alternative figures, he was actually throwing in bridges and street lighting, as we know that that can seriously deflate a highways budget to make it look much bigger than it is. So in terms of actually road and pavement repairs, in 2010-11, it was 6.8 million. So this is actual road and pavement repairs. And in 18-19, it's 3.4 million. But within this 3.4 million, 1.2 million comes from Bolton Council. It's almost a third. If you go back pre-austerity, that wasn't the situation. We do, I think Councillor Wilkinson or Hayes made the point, we rely heavily on central government grants for such an expensive area of council service. We need that support from the government. I'm going to have to scrub all this next section because you supported it. Austerity is over. Isn't it wonderful? So let's just explain a little bit more. Why did we bring this motion? And the 3 points I'm going to make now, you wholeheartedly agree with. First of all, we want to ensure that all members of the council are aware that unless this council reallocates capital monies to highways, as it's been doing for the last few years, and incidentally, as a consequence, other capital projects fail, then the situation on our roads will be much, much worse. So we accept the appropriate praise from the party opposite for our actions on this. Number two, we want to join with other councils of all colours to call upon the government to reverse its damaging and dangerous starvation of highway infrastructure funds. And number three, I'm sure you agree with that second point, number two, but number three, let's call out the Bolton Tories for the hypocrites that they actually are. Let's be honest about this, because on the one hand, you do support cuts to public services. You're particularly enthusiastic about cuts to council services. And let's just go back a couple of meetings ago where you refused, as a group, to condemn cuts to our primary schools. You refused, every one of you sat there, and refused to condemn cuts to our primary schools. So you do embrace cuts to public sector because you believe in it. But you have the audacity to then criticise council services that have inevitably declined. The Bolton Tories remind me of the ridiculous and absurd image that many of us might have seen in person or in cartoons of a chap stood in a park, nonchalantly looking around, pretending that the dog there doing its business has got nothing at all to do with him. This is what you know. This government that's doing its business, its proverbial, over Bolton Council, has got nothing at all to do with the Bolton Tories. Well, it does. Well, it does. So, I don't personally, because you know, I'm trying to be nice to you. I don't really want you to do something that you're clearly very uncomfortable with.
Councillor Peel, can you please...
I will. It's the biggest set of contradictory statements, two-faced split personality argument I have ever heard. And let me just say, finally, to Councillor Hewitt and others who've quoted, you're not supporting this in the spirit, and we welcome this. You deplore your government, you condemn your government, and you acknowledge that it is deliberate withdrawal of funds. That's on record. We're happy to have your support, and thank you.
Excuse me, you've all had your say now. Councillor Chadwick, would you like to sum up?
Yes, Madam Mayor, if I may. I remember the Tory group standing on the steps of the town hall, complete with banner, recommending that the council reallocates £10 million. Well, we've had an exhibition tonight of a number of funding sources that are going to pull it from: sale of property, reserves, and from raiding the PSP bank account. Well, for a party that allegedly purports to be good with finances, this figure includes, from the Octagon, we had 4.3 from our council's grant and 2 million from the Octagon Theatre Trust. These are definitely not council monies. The director replaced, clearly Bolton Tories are in the same league of Toy Town finances like Northampton County Council, having set council tax rates at 0 for the last 8 years, while spending their reserves and having nearly bankrupted that council. Austerity is a political choice. Theresa May last week stated that austerity was over. Yes, I repeat, austerity is over. Oh, no, it's not, and it's not pantomime season. This is quite rich, with this council facing an additional cut of £30 million in 2019-21. Of course, the parties opposite are in denial that this is anything to do with the current state of local government finances. Last November's budget from the Tories cut corporation tax by £5 billion. The bank stole money to the nation, but received a £4 million cut. Utilities, like United Utilities, are now allowed to borrow more money to pay dividends to private shareholders. Local government is in crisis, and you, the Tories, are in denial that you're the same party in government by saying nothing, to do with us. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Name vote. Just let me know there's name vote.
Name vote.
Okay, councillors. Councillor Abdullah. Councillor Adia. Councillor Ayub. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Donaghy. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gillis. Councillor Harkin. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Ismail. Councillor Kellett. Councillor Curran. Councillor McEwen. Councillor Mistry. Councillor Morris. Councillor Murray. Councillor Newell. Councillor Peel. Councillor Pickup. Councillor Sylvester. Councillor Sheikh. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Waters. Councillor Zaman. Councillor Allen. Councillor Baines. Councillor Cox. Councillor Dean. Councillor Fairclough. Councillor Galloway. Councillor Greenhull. Councillor Haslam. Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Kirk Robinson. Councillor Muslim. Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Radcliffe. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Warren. Councillor Seawild. Councillor Peawild. Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Hornby. Councillor Bagnall. Councillor Hayes. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Flitcroft. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Sanders. The motion is carried. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a motion in the name of Councillor Howarth on working with business partners.
Councillor Howarth.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, this motion is about business, this motion is about Brexit, this motion is about Bolton. We know that there are wide effects that are going to take hold of our country because of Brexit, and they, of course, are discussed on a daily basis in the press. Why business? Well, we know that the public sector in Greater Manchester is coming together and building some resilience work. We know that when we look at Greater Manchester, we've got higher export rates than is the case of the average in the United Kingdom. We know when we look at businesses in Bolton, we've actually got quite a lot of medium-sized businesses. We've got an interesting footprint of business in Bolton. One of the headlines still with Brexit is some business uncertainty. Now, it's not going to take me long, is it, to get to what is called, by many now, the Tory Brexit shambles. On these benches, we watch this Tory Brexit shambles. Resignations. The country is not feeling confident about Brexit. On these benches, though, we've got some strong Remainers. We've got some members who are supporters of Brexit. And we've got some, in a sense, that this motion stands for, who voted Remain but are willing to face Brexit in the face, if you like. We see it coming. Perhaps members might give some views on that. You know, I'm not Roger with the motion. I'm not Brexit Bob with the motion. I'm doing the Bolton motion. Okay. Yeah, he's around. He's gone on to do other things. He's Brexited. I must watch my time and not stray too much. Forgive me. You know, there's a little bit of information. We've got this Greater Manchester Brexit Research Unit, and the worry is, of course, we don't know what Brexit would be. And there's a concern, isn't there, about any hard Brexit, major concern about that. What is the government going to be putting this country through? What is the certainty? What is the uncertainty? There is a major worry for Greater Manchester of a 12% drop on the economy, something like a 6 billion fallout of the Greater Manchester economy. These things are of concern. Many of you will want to talk about the positives. I recognise that. Now, coming to this, Labour councillors. Let's make no mistake, major interest in jobs and employment. Of course, it's one of our major areas of interest. Of course it is. Of course, many of us have represented workers for many years. We've major interest in these matters, and we're talking about business tonight, but I don't want to forget, of course, we've got concerns about wages. Sure, it's just this is not the motion for that. We've got concerns about conditions. This is not the motion for that. Going to our business services. We've got business services in Bolton. We've got business services in Greater Manchester. And when you look at the Greater Manchester business services, we want any of the businesses in Bolton to be able to take advantage of some of that. We want that. I've had to take my glasses off. Forgive me, I've written this notes to myself. Prompts in too smaller writing, stupid of me, but I'll say it again. I'm sorry if anybody finds it rude. Brexit Bob is, I was saying Bob, forgive me, that my motion is not Roger's motion, forgive me, and my motion obviously is not that of Brexit Bob. It's just a Bolton motion, so forgive me. I've been polite to at least say I did mention you. So I'm talking about the fact that businesses, there's testimony now, if anybody wants to have a look at, say, the Growth Company in Manchester, the support that is available there, that it's white-labelled, it links to Bolton, our officers do superb business support work, let's say that, tonight, let's get that said tonight. But some of the testimony is businesses that are starting to be able to export for the first time. You know, some of that is happening, they're looking at these issues, there is some good testimony. We've got literally thousands of people in our wards, across our wards, who work in businesses. Think about the businesses. I mean, the footprint, you know, in Bolton, we've got businesses on the Harper Green-Hulton border.
Councillor Howard, can you sum up, please?
You want me to sum up? Okay. I didn't realise I was taking up so much time. Forgive me. Forgive me. I think it's the jokes that have swung it that way, isn't it? The biggest problem is what's been raised already, and that is that the Tory government is not showing support to GM. Just to hone in on this, you know, Andy Burnham will say he's asked these questions many times in London of politicians. So have you done a Brexit analysis that includes Greater Manchester? Answer to that question, yes. So could we have that analysis to help us prepare, to help us support our economy in Greater Manchester? Every time he's asked that question, as leader said, the answer is no. How is Andy Burnham holding his diplomatic nerve? What are you going to do about these
Councillor
matters
Howarth.
where Greater Manchester is not being supported?
Councillor Howarth.
We don't have confidence in the Tories on Brexit.
Councillor Howarth.
We want a general election. We
Enough.
want a general election so we can see to this country better.
With respect, if I do ask for a summing up, can we have a summing up? Thank you. Councillor Adia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. I'm happy to second and reserve the right to speak later, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Kurt Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to start by saying I wonder how much of this speech, or the speeches that come over from there, in fact, for this motion will be cribbed from the LGA Labour email that Councillor Thomas sent round the whole council, as a lot of the last ones were. Madam Mayor, Bolton, like Britain, is open for business, despite whatever that was that Councillor Howard just said. We who campaigned to leave the EU have always said that Brexit will provide many opportunities for trade and industry, and I welcome with open arms any endeavour by this council to ensure that Bolton's businesses, and I do of course mean the borough, because West Horton, Farnworth and elsewhere will also benefit, but to ensure that Bolton's businesses can take full advantage of the opportunities that Brexit will provide. These predicted economic woes that Councillor Howarth came up with are not a certainty. They have often been proven wrong in the past, so let's prepare for the worst, because of course you have to do that when you're in a business, but aim for the best. I'm very happy to support the spirit of this motion, and I look forward to seeing this advance to a PDG. I welcome this positive approach to Brexit, despite what Councillor Howarth just said, which our borough voted in a majority for. It's very refreshing to see a positive view of the opportunities that Brexit will provide, and certainly contrasts with the portents of doom and gloom about our nation's future from the gentleman in the yellow corner. I will therefore support this motion.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. Well, I too will be supporting this motion. I think we've got to look at it, depending on which side of the coin you're on. You've got to look at the opportunities that will be, despite all the naysayers, available to companies in this country. Let's not forget that the EU is a group of 27 other countries. We in Britain are quite often portrayed as an isolated, small little country with no real say in the world. Don't forget, we are a member of 54 countries in the